Josh Heird had some interesting things to say discussing the upcoming coaching search. And in my opinion, Will Wade needs to be considered as a candidate for the Louisville men's basketball job. All coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. For those who don't know who I am, I've been hosting the show for about 3 years now. I also serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone while doing PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. A good show lined up for us on this Wednesday evening edition of the show. We react to Athletic Director Josh Heird's thoughts about the upcoming coaching search, discuss whether or not McNeese State head coach Will Wade will be a candidate for this search, while also explaining why he makes a ton of sense as the next Cardinals head coach. So Wednesday was pretty eventful. The Cardinals did the inevitable, it seemed. Josh Heird met with Louisville men's head basketball coach Kenny Payne to let him know that he was being let go on Wednesday afternoon. He then met with the media to discuss the decision and also give his thoughts on the upcoming coaching search. And truthfully, Heird said everything that I would have expected him to. All the things he said aligned with my thoughts that were surrounding this press conference. Heird essentially spoke like an athletic director. He wasn't too detailed in the way he answered questions. There's like a script for, and this isn't on, Josh Heird or athletic directors, athletic directors, coaches, people in strong positions, some things that they say that they're giving you sort of the minimal amount of information and not trying to relay too much, without going into too much specific info. And I'm not faulting Heird for doing that. I mean, there's really not much more to be said. He answered the questions, and honestly, I thought that he handled himself in a very professional way on Wednesday. One thing that I was worried about with this separation was that I felt like there was going to be more drama, because there's been drama for the past couple of months surrounding the men's basketball program. Kenny Payne made some comments after the season-ending loss to NC State on Tuesday evening that flustered a good amount of the fan base, comparing the Cardinals program to the Titanic, basically stating that some of the blame is on the fans for being too negative, despite the team only winning 12 games. I digress. I was still a little bit worried. And Josh Heird, I think, said all of the right things. He thanked Kenny publicly. He expressed his gratitude for Payne taking the job back in 2022. He acknowledged that it wasn't a great situation that he was stepping into, but ultimately stated and admitted that he believed a change was needed to be made. Now, whether you believe this or not, that's up to you, but he even went as far as saying that he didn't really feel external pressure to hire Payne in 2022, that it was solely his decision, and he backed the now former men's head basketball coach. But I thought that he handled it in the right way. There were some moments where it seemed like the inflection in his voice changed a little bit when certain questions were asked. The question as to whether or not there was some other stuff going on behind the scenes that limited what Kenny was able to do. I think that Josh, it seemed like he took that a little to heart. He took it personally and basically stated that if that was the case, then he needed to know so he can make it better. But all head coaches are pretty much treated the same way. And then, there were just, overall points to where you could tell that the emotions were there, in the way that these answers are given. It's almost in a cold, calculated manner, but when these questions were asked, it seemed like, there was definitely some more emotional substance. But like I said, I am micro analyzing here. Josh Heird did a fine job in the press conference, like I knew he would. Now, as it relates to the upcoming coaching search, there are a couple of interesting things that he said. Admittedly, nothing too revealing, as you would expect. I think that I don't know if it was Eric Crawford. It might have been Eric Crawford. It was somebody that I think asked for the names on his list, and Heird didn't give it to him, which I thought was kind of funny. But one of the main things right off the bat is that Josh Heird does not plan to use a search firm this time around. And I think that is pretty significant here, considering that they hired one in 2022 and the search firm recommended Kenny Payne to Louisville and DePaul, and obviously that didn't necessarily work out. So I think that that's something to look forward to. Another thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that, I mean, when you talk about the timeline, you have to really understand that it depends on the candidate that you're looking at. But Heird basically said that, looking at the timeline here, trying to find an exact quote, there was one quote that I believe he used that I felt like was pretty significant, but regardless, it was pretty significant of a decision for the Cardinals to make the move before April 1st when the buyout dropped $2 million. Heird stressed that timing is of the essence as well. And he also gave his or identified the qualities that he's looking for in the next head coach. There are 5 that, well, I guess you really could say 4, but I split them up into 5. Adaptability was a term that Heird repeated a couple times. He started out by using it to say that the next head coach needs to be able to connect with the fans, with the media, and be adaptable, to the situation, to the, to the job at hand. And if you go back to the episode that we had on this show, what was it, a couple episodes ago, where we identified the 3 key qualities that the next head coach needs to have, adaptability was under the X's and O's style of play portion, but Heird is using this to, relay it into connecting with the fans and the media. So one thing that I will say, that even though Heird isn't necessarily outspoken to the fan base in some aspects, maybe to the fans want it, he still understands how the fans feel. And the ability to connect with the fan base, with the media, with the university is a key thing that he's focusing on. That was the first thing that came out of his mouth, was the adaptability to be able to connect with the fans and with the media. So take that for what you will. He then said the ability to build a program, and even going further and saying, and having that proven track record already. So the ability to build a program, but not only that, but the examples from your resume that include that. Now, most of the coaching candidates that Louisville will go after have, by definition, in some sort of shape or fashion, built up a program. Some have built up multiple, some have built up one to a very high level, like Scott Drew at Baylor. But he mentioned that being able to build a program, it's pretty key. Ability to navigate the NIL landscape. Something that it seemed like Kenny Payne didn't do all that well was utilize the resources that the Cardinals had with the 502 circle, with the NIL funding available. So that just goes to show you that, being able to maximize the resources around you and knowing how to do so is key. Now this was a very interesting thing that he said. I'm paraphrasing here, but he wants someone who is, quote unquote, dying to be at U of L and would crawl to this job. I agree with that. you shouldn't have to convince a candidate to come to Louisville. Now, granted, if it's a guy like Scott Drew, that is a potentially even different situation because it's a different context. But in almost all of the other cases, you shouldn't, have to convince a guy at a lower school to come here or even stay here, view this as a destination job. Your focus should be on the people that do view this as a destination job. And one of the main things that he said at the end was having a coach that understands the expectations with this program and understands the essentially the size and the enormity. Gosh, I can't speak. Enormity. It's like anemone. I can't even speak. Enormity of this job because it is one of the top 627 top 627 programs in college basketball. And the expectations are there. And he mentioned you don't really have the luxury of time at a spot like this like you would at a lower level program. You have to win. You have to get to the tournament. So I think that that's very interesting. That's sort of going to be a guideline and what we're going to keep referring back to as we discuss some of the candidates. One of the more popular candidates, at least among social media, one that many wonder if he would be viewed as a candidate in Josh Heird's eyes, is McNeese State head coach Will Wade. Josh Heird got asked about going after coaches with, some history. And he had a very interesting answer that leaves the door cracked for a guy like Will Wade. We'll explain why he might be considered here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Cardinal fans, mark your calendar for the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show, Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Will Wade has become sort of like the number two option for the Louisville social media push when it comes to the coaching search. Scott Drew has the overwhelming vast majority of the votes. Will Wade is starting to pick up steam. The Wade Brigade, as I call them, has started to be very vocal on social media. And it sparked the question, will Will Wade be considered because of his history with the NCAA? For those who don't know, Will Wade began his coaching career at Chattanooga, then went to VCU, spent 2 years at both destinations, got the LSU job, ultimately, I should say, got fired from that job because of his inclusion with the same sort of issue that Louisville got into with with Brian Bowen, I should say, being caught on tape talking about paying players, and ultimately got fired due to the findings of the NCAA, got hit with a 2-year show cause, and is now at McNeese State, to where he is now going to the NCAA tournament. McNeese State won the Southland Conference 30-3 overall. He has 1 year left on that show cause that will expire in the summer of 2025. He already served a 10-game suspension earlier this year and half of the recruiting sanctions as well. But essentially what's in this show cause is no off-campus recruiting-related visits or activities during any applicable April or summer evaluation and or contact period. There's a reduction in official visits. No recruiting conversations between this upcoming September 1st to October 15th. Same thing with unofficial visits in that time frame. But pretty much that is all. It doesn't seem like that harsh of penalties. And it's made people wonder whether or not Louisville would go after Wade, since the punishment isn't really all that much at this time. Many believe that Louisville won't touch a candidate with any type of history. So you're ruling out Chris Beard, potentially Nate Oates, and Will Wade by just overall inclusion in this category. However, some say it's possible, but Josh Heird's probably not going to take that headache. I think that if that's the merit of your opinion, and if Josh Heird says, you know what, no, we're not going to go with a coach with history. We just got out of a ton of scandals. The NCAA black cloud is gone. We have put that in the rearview mirror. The last thing we need is to hire a coach with the show cause. I am not going to argue that. I'm going to say, okay, that's fine, and move my analysis to a different candidate, because it's a completely justified response. Although I personally believe that this show cause isn't as much cause for alarm as other issues. If the athletic director says, I don't need that risk, I don't need that headache, because if Will Wade were to mess up and you get sanctions while you're under a show cause penalty, you're opening up Pandora's box again, and I understand the risk there. So I knew that a question would arise during the press conference on Wednesday, and I was going to base whether or not I talked about Will Wade as a candidate upon Josh Heird's answer. It's been interpreted different ways. Some think, well, there you go, Will Wade's not going to be a candidate. I feel like most of the people are like, oh, that keeps the door open a little bit. What I heard was that Josh Heird has very high standards and a very strict no tolerance policy. What I didn't hear was, no, we're not going to go after a candidate with a little bit of a past. I'm going to read you the full transcript. Shout out to Mike Rutherford at Card Chronicle. He had a full transcript written out. So I'm going to read it on here. The question, getting back to this, here is the question. Got to find that. My apologies here. I'm going to find it here in a second. I literally just had it, but I was looking for the time frame question, but ultimately it is what it is. So let's see if I can find it. Why is this not able to be? Why can't I find this? And here I go. I can't even find it now. But what he goes on to say is that he has the standards, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to not just the candidacy, but ultimately, here we go. I found it. So my apologies. On hiring a coach with background with issues, Josh Heird says, I think I typically have a high threshold from an integrity standpoint, but I think that threshold needs to be elevated based on the past that we've experienced here. I don't want to look at just the candidate. I think it's the combination of our history to say, hey, is there anybody out there that is worth looking at? And, what does their past look like? So, never say never, but, I think most of the people in this room understand my expectations around this athletic department and the people that work in this athletic department. That will be weighed, no pun intended. He didn't say that. That's me saying no pun intended. He says that will be weighed as we go through this process. Some took it as Heird saying no chance. Others said, ooh, he didn't say no. That's where I'm at. I still think that there's a hesitancy to hire a guy like Will Wade, but I think Will Wade makes such a ton of sense. That's not even English there, but he makes a ton of sense as the next head coach for Louisville for a multitude of different reasons. And we're going to break it down here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big game upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Will Wade makes a ton of sense for this job. I am a huge fan of Will Wade. Those who know me know that I have firmly been on the Wade brigade for a couple months now. Obviously, I haven't said anything during the rest of the season. Didn't really want to be, a distraction. But I still think Will Wade is, behind Scott Drew, the best option for Louisville. And I'm going to use Josh Heird's qualities that he's looking for to support my case. Able to connect with the fan base and the media. I can tell you with my ties to various people in Louisiana that Will Wade, despite what happened, despite LSU getting in trouble, is still a beloved figure in the state of Louisiana. There are LSU boosters that are helping out. People that have historically donated to LSU are helping out Will Wade in terms of NIL at McNeese State. He is a very respected and liked person, not only amongst his fans and the media, but also his coaching staff and his players. There were some rumors a while back that Will Wade was hard to work for, and his assistant coaches didn't like him. That's been pretty much debunked. Multiple assistant coaches have come out and said, no, Will Wade is great to work for. He's a good friend of mine. He is all about, bringing his assistant coaches with him and getting them to a spot to where they're succeeding. Ability to connect with the fan base and media. Check. Ability to build a program. He now will have taken 3 programs to the NCAA tournament. Took over a Chattanooga team, went 2 years there, didn't make the tournament. VCU, 2 seasons there, went to the tournament both years. He went to LSU to where Johnny Jones didn't really leave the program in a great spot, struggled right out of the gate. Second year went 25-5, and then didn't lose over 11 games in his remaining 4 seasons. Now, he didn't have a ton of tournament success. Now, that is something to look at, but ultimately, he's been able to rebuild LSU. McNeese State just had pretty much their best season in program history, 30-3, won the Southland regular season and conference tournament, the most win or the largest win turnaround in collegiate basketball history, 19 wins. The team only won 11 last year, immediately turned that around. So 3 teams to the NCAA tournament. So ability to build a program, check. Ability to navigate NIL landscape. Will Wade is a tremendous advocate for getting his players paid. And I'm not using that in a humorous way to sort of dance around the whole quote-unquote strong-ass offer meme that rolls around. But Will Wade is a solid recruiter. Now, will he be good without Nike? NIL is huge. Louisville has a great NIL foundation. Will Wade is a very likable coach, and ultimately, he would be able to navigate that NIL landscape. Check. Someone who is dying to be at U of L and understanding the job at hand. There's been rumors that Will Wade wanted this job back in 2022. There were rumors that he wanted this job back in 2018. So it makes sense that he would want this job now. From what I've heard through the grapevine, Will Wade would 100% come to Louisville. So someone who is dying to be at U of L, check. So you've checked off those boxes. Another thing that I want to go for is I think X's and O's wise, Will Wade plays a very fun style of basketball, very tenacious defense with movement on the offensive side. They really prioritize, three-point shooting. And McNeese State was fun to watch this season. LSU is a very, very fun team, or was a very fun team to watch under Will Wade way back when, just a couple of years ago. But COVID makes me feel like the COVID times make me feel like 4 years ago was a decade ago. So the style of play is there. Understanding the fan base is there. Recruiting is there. Has shown at McNeese State that he's able to use the transfer portal. Would view Louisville as a destination job. I think would be able to rejuvenate the fan base almost immediately. I've mentioned time and time again on different platforms that ultimately I think he would have a Jeff Brom-esque press conference to where he would get you fired up. Something for me also, talk about the age of some of these candidates. Will Wade is 41 years old. I think his best days coaching are ahead of him, no doubt. Sure, he doesn't have that tournament success that others have. He's 41. He would likely view this spot as a destination job, would be here potentially over 2 decades, which is what we're looking for, is a Denny Crum, Rick Pitino timeline coach. And I think he would be a great recruiter. It makes a lot of sense to me. I understand the risks involved. If you can look past, 14 to 15 months of risk for a potential trade-off of 2 decades of very good basketball, I think it's a risk worth taking. Now, granted, I'm not the athletic director making the decision here. His buyout is cheap. If you're worried about finances here, his buyout is cheap. You can commit more to the NIL side of things. He's getting paid, or I think his buyout's like $1.125 million, which compared to some of the other candidates, it's not even a comparison. And ultimately, it's all about which I mentioned outside of Scott Drew, every coach has the risk. Will Wade has risks. Mick Cronin has risks. Nate Oates has risks. Eric Musselman, Jerome Tang, Dusty May, Josh Schertz. Other coaches that we're going to talk about over the duration of the next couple of weeks have risks. It's all about who can project to bring this program to national prominence again, who can keep the program there, who can be a quote-unquote lifer for the rest of their career, and who could be a guy that could cut the nets down and hang another banner, who could bring this fan base back. Frank Williams Wade is a great candidate. I'm biased. Some aren't huge fans of Wade. Personally, for me, I am. I think he makes a ton of sense for Louisville. Will he be considered? TBD. Josh Heird didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. So it really just depends. If Scott Drew ultimately says no, if a guy like Dusty May goes to Ohio State, if Heird says, you know what, we're going to take a risk because the reward is so high, great. If he says the risk is too high, we're going to go with another good candidate, okay, that's fine as well. So, but in terms of Will Wade, I think he would make a great candidate. But we're going to continue to talk about the candidates as the week goes along. That's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.